So those who participated in the Congress from its beginning could hear also a few lectures about tikkun. What's tikkun? What's the concept of tikkun in Kabbalah, and especially in Sabbatian, Lunianic Kabbalah, and later in Sabbatian Kabbalah, that you can actually rectify things. So we are rectifying here something. When you grow up in Europe, and you read all of these chivalry novels and historical novels, and then you ask yourself, where is the Jewish chivalry? But you can see there are all kinds of not totally dreamt dreams, or not unfinished dreams about that. As you can see here, this is the famous Navon from Sarajevo, from Sarajevo. And you can see three different escudos. Right? You can see three different coats of arms. So on the right side, you actually see how they are originally placed. And you can see how above the first word of the Pascal Haggadah, you actually have the escudo of Barcelona, or escudo de Reinado de Aragon. And then in lower two corners, you have two additional escudos, and there is a huge disputation amongst the scholars whether these were two Jewish families who had their own escudos, or whether these are two escudos of the two Christian families, that those Jewish families, probably Sarajevo Haggadah, and we have with us Professor Shalom Savar, who just recently published a great research on the Sarajevo Haggadah, and he also summarized this entire story. So the question is whether the escudos are actually Jewish, or these are the Jewish consiglieres and bankers of two aristocratic families. But it seems to be that Haggadah was produced as a wedding gift to two Jewish families getting together. And then, as you can see, there is a fleur de lis, or whatever is the French word, right? And there is a question, why would you have it there? But let me just see what's the right direction here. Oh, I see now. Yes. So, now we are switching to this thing that you all have seen, at least on the backs that you have received during the conference or at the beginning of the conference. This is actually a coat of arms of our order of Caballeros del Ladino. I'll tell you how it started, as an idea. There were people who were donors at the center on one side, and on the other side there were people who should be recognized for the tremendous contribution that they have given to Sephardic culture, or to the research of Sephardic culture. So it's three different aspects, right? One is helping the center survive, the other is research, and the third is contribution to the culture itself, not to the research of the culture. And then we were thinking what to do, and obviously some people might prefer, we hope you wouldn't, but some people, would prefer some kind of monetary recognition. As a Center for Sephardic Studies at the Ben-Gurion University, if it was Ben-Gurion Airport, we could do much better. But it's Ben-Gurion University, and we can't really. So we said, let's do Order of Chivalry. And at that particular moment, Professor Yaakov Ben-Tolima was also on the board with us, and he said, you must be crazy, chivalry orders. Who gives the sign of chivalry, the kings, the queens? So Tamar was like, well, we can't do this. I told her, every single culture has some kind of premises, right? Some kind of, how we call it, things which are never questioned. Things that the culture is built on. And one of such things in Sephardic culture is that there is such a thing as order. No Sephardi ever asked ask himself, what's honor? What honor is all about? Who is giving you? Everybody knows honor exists. So I told him, listen, nobody's going to ask how come they are giving this. People will just ask, why did he receive? Why did she receive? Why did she receive first? And it really worked that way. And then the Israeli Ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs also started calling us whether we can give this recognition to all kinds of people. The state cannot give anything to them, but the foreign ministry thinks they are important enough, and so on. And I was always like, of course, if they are related to Ladino, with pleasure. Then, unfortunately, the late president of Israel, Don Yitzhak Navon, he was the 5th president of Israel, he passed away. And his son Erez, calls me like a few days before the first Ashkara, first annual ceremony, and he says, listen, you know, my father did a lot for Ladino and we were friends, and I'm looking for different ways of how his memory could be commemorated amongst us for Ladino. What can you offer me? So I told him, listen, we have an order of chivalry, and we can call it after him. And he was like, oh, yeah, that's cool, that's cool. So I told him, well, in that case, you need to be with us in these celebrations. And usually, there is a member of Navon family in this kind of ceremonies, whether Miri Navon, the widow of the late president, or Erez Navon, the son, or Mama, the daughter. There is usually somebody coming. Erez couldn't come this time. Last time when he came to Belgrade, that's when Donna Jelena Erbeja and Don Nenad Makuljevic were bestowed with chivalry. He really came, even though that time also his wife was supposed to give birth. But obviously, she remembers that as well. And this time she's also supposed to give birth. She was like, you are not going to any Belgrades anytime soon. So he's not with us. But I'd like to, so all of this developed gradually. You can see the two, this actually has to do also with Judith's talk, because, you know, the convivencia, tres culturas, how religion converted into culture, and all that kind of stuff. So you can see Espada Salomonis, Solomon's sword, very traditional thing, invented only yesterday. And it has David, the top, and it has a linguistic, it really exists. And you can see how it has here David, the star, and here it has menorah, and so on. Why? Because Toledo was known in medieval times for its beautiful swords, and now nobody uses the 1954. So nobody was using the swords anymore. It seemed to be peaceful. Let's forget about Syria, Iraq, Yugoslavia, and all other things that the West is doing. And they felt they should be producing swords for the tourists. So they invented this series of the swords called after great people, whatever. Alexander the Great and King Arthur, and so on. They also invented one for some. Now, once we already had the sword, we said now we can also do the coat of arms. So this was actually, our center is like 60 years old, and this is all, you know, evolution. Now, what's written here around? We are, exactly. Now, we are the University of Ben-Gurion, but the full name of the university is University of Ben-Gurion University in the Negev. Negev is the southern province of Israel. And this biblical verse actually says, Galut Yerushalayim Asher Yisrael Yirshu et Are HaNegev. That means the diaspora of Jerusalem, or the captives of Jerusalem who live in Spain, they will inherit the cities of Negev. Right? So it's obviously meant for the Muslim Center of Ladino culture and Ben-Gurion University. Now, additional two things. You can see the lion, it's obviously the lion of Judah, and you can also see the flow of Lee. And everybody asked, what's your relation with French? And we say, well, our relation with French is that they are stealing things from us. So, I'll show you how deep is our relation with French. You see this. This is an old Israeli shekel from 2,000 years ago. This is a new Israeli shekel which is modeled after this one. And you can see obviously the floor of the lily. And from outside it looks like this, but actually if you turn it like this, then you see the David's star. And where in the temple we have floor of the lily, it specifically says in the book of Kings, first book of Kings, chapter 7, verse 26, that this thing called Yam Shalom, which is basically the water container in the middle of the temple, from which the small water containers were filled in order for the priests to wash their hands and to wash their lap, it was done as floor of the lily. So if you look at it from above, you would actually see Star of David. Then, another thing, in the book of Melachim, there is a visual which shouldn't be there. You have two columns, right? And they are described, Yachim and Boaz, and it says that on the top of them, on top of each of them, there is a floor of the lily. Now we can see why. Because 6 and 6 are 12, and 12 are tribes of Israel. So, being that the temple was the national temple which represents all the tribes, you actually had 6 plus 6 on both sides of it. But this is even more. This is even more interesting. It seems to be that at the top of menorah, which is 7 sticks candelabra or whatever it's called in English, on the top of each there was a lamp, oil lamp, which was also formed, which also had the form of the floor of the lily. And that floor of the lily. And that would actually mean that the flame itself was the seventh. In that case, you would have 7 candelabras. Each of them has oil lamp with 6 points, and then the 7th point is the point towards the heaven. That's the point of the flame itself, in which case you have 49. And this is to everybody who is a little bit familiar with the so-called Old Testament, or as far as Jews are concerned, the Testament. We know that it's 7, 49, the Jubilee, and so on. So now the game is all of a sudden more clear. So how this then, how this became French symbol? In Christianity, it symbolizes Jerusalem and Mary, the mother of Jesus, because it originally symbolized Israel. And then there is a verse which says, "Kimitzion tetzeh Torah, udvar Adonai b'Yerushalayim," because right. So actually, Mary is the new Israel, or Mary is where the word of God is coming from, and so on. So it's entirely symbolic, actually. Let me put it this way: the Shir Hashirim, right? The Song of Songs, biblical Song of Songs, in Judaism is usually taken to mean a love story between God and His people. So the people of Israel in that song is metaphorized by floor of the lily, right? It says "Chavatzelet Shalom" and so on. Now in Christianity, the bride of the Song of Songs became Mary, and that's why "Chavatzelet Shalom," which is Hebrew name of this flower, actually represents Mary. So in any case, in our context, it's not Mary. And here you can see, once you start, you never end. So we go to these beautiful togas in Toledo, and then there was a beautiful discovery. I was looking, I wanted more. So I was looking where from to order, and it said made in Turkey. So, okay. And then this is the Espada ceremonies that I was talking about previously. And now we are getting to something even more interesting. Every single coat of arms has 3 possible statuses. One status is the status we saw previously, which is basically without the crown, without the motto, and without the supporters. That would be, in heraldics, that would be the normal status of a coat of arms. But then you can add to a coat of arms, you can add to coat of arms supporters. There is all kind of creatures which support it. And we obviously took traitors from the Sarajevo Haggadah. Then, if you already have supporters, you can add a crown, but we added the mitznefet of Chacham Bashir. In other words, the crown of Torah, or mitznefet of the Sephardic chief Rabbi Fisler. And then, everything is Ladino, and we already have here Hebrew, so the only thing missing was Arabic. And what we put there is a sentence which was usually quoted by the late President Navon. Oh, so here you can see from where the traitors are taken, right? And this is crown of Torah, right? Of the mitznefet or turban of the Sephardic chief rabbi. And interestingly enough, most of the people don't know this. This didn't usually look like this. This is Hamri Zion Hausel, which rebranded it in order to look like the new state of Israel, blue and white, and 12 tribes of Israel. Before that, it didn't look like this. And we are using specifically, obviously, Israel. And then look at this. Now, I'll show you something. If we are in Serbia already, many a time, the next possibility is to have a royal coat around the coat of arms, right? Now, instead of having something like this, we opted for something much more Jewish and Sephardic, and that's the talit. And actually, the flag of the state of Israel follows the Sephardic talit. This is Sephardic Sunni talit. And then the Sephardim used to have on their talitiot, they used to have kenafot, right? The adorned corners. So what we put there are the symbol of the Navon center, right? This is the symbol of the Navon center, so we put 4 of them. And then we added tefillin. In any coat of arms, you should have it. Really nice touch. So, in any case, then Abishag said, talit is so male, right? So, a woman not used to it. Then we said, well, for ladies of the order, we will make instead of one with talit, we will have one with parachot. Why? Because parachot were usually produced by women. In Sephardic tradition, not necessarily directly for the synagogue, they were used as covering for bed or covering for table coverings, and then when the grandma dies or something like that, it would be given to Sarah. And then here you can see that the peluk, that's something that Sephardic women all over Balkans wore below the tukata. And then you ask yourself, well, if it's already below the tukata, how do you have it? First of all, you feel better about yourself. And second of all, you remove tukata when you are visiting women, are visiting women, they remove their tukatas. And the level of successfulness of an event in Balkans was counted by the number of tepelukes present. They would say, oh, it was such an event, there were 40 women with tepelukes. That would be, 40 women told that this is really important enough for them in order to bring their own personal bank. And then we added also the Ladino and the Torah, because most of the things in Sephardic Bechal, in Sephardic place where Torah is kept, are somehow related to women. So here you can see the parachot. And you can see how on Sephardic parachot basically mean the fact that they were not produced as to be parachot, they were produced as something else. Then you have all these additions. When a grandma dies, right, they take her bed covering and they convert it into parochet, and only then they add the inscriptions, and this is the peruk. And I didn't tell you the last thing. What's our motto? It is from a song by the famous Jahili Judeo-Arabian poet, Samuel al-Yahudi, Samuel the Jew. And the Arabs have this fazon zone de Cree, right, in which they are fighting all kind of imagined enemies. And so he says in one of his songs, he says, she told me, you are a handful. In other words, the Jews are a handful. And I told her, Inna kirama pa'alilu. The aristocracy is always few members. And then Yitzhak Navon, who was the fifth president of Israel, separated himself obviously. They used to call him in Israel Mr. Ladino. Whenever he would be told, there is 50%, whatever, 46% Ashkenazim in Israel and 46% Oriental Jews in Israel, and there are your Sephardim. And he would always say, well, not everybody can be aristocracy. Right? And that's why, exactly, we put that as a motto, not only to remember Navon, but also because we believe that people receiving this recognition do belong to Ladino aristocracy or aristocracy of research of Ladino. And now I would like to invite Donna Yaramera, who was already laureated the Ladino Chivalry, to present our first 2022 laureate. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure. It's indeed a great honor to present to you Dr. Queen Kavita. Dr. Queen Kavita has contributed to our society and to all societies who value culture and learning in so many ways that it's very difficult to sum up all the aspects of her wonderfully fruitful contribution to both higher education, university studies, to culture in general, to language culture, to the culture of memory, to diplomacy. And here are just a few words about her life's achievement. Kavita was born in Belgrade, schooled and educated in Chicago, Belgrade, Cairo, Havana, and she is at the same time an alumna of the University of Belgrade and the University of Zagreb. She did her PhD in 1982 at the Faculty of Philosophy at the University of Zagreb. She was employed at the Institute for Literature and Art over the period between 1980, 1982, 1991, 1994 to 1994, then 1996 to 2001. She was in the United States of America, where she taught at many respectable and esteemed universities. For example, the University of Kansas, the University of Indiana, Ohio State University, the University of Pittsburgh. She was our ambassador to Israel from 2001 to 2006. Later, she returned to her job at the Institute for Literature and Art, where she contributed again to many different projects of comparative studies between Serbian literature and art. She has published a great number of books. They range between scientific monographs to all sorts of genres of publication that deal with the history of literature, and also she contributed greatly by producing a great number of translations of the most important and significant authors from the Spanish literature. Because during her studies at the University of Belgrade, Kavita majored in English, but her second language, so her minor was Spanish. But as it so turned out, the minor became the major, if I may say so. And I think that with all her heart, she has produced some of the seminal studies that all of us who deal with the Spanish world use in so many ways. And I must say that many of us here present have exchanged our views of how, when you deal with anything Sephardic or any aspect of Spanish culture, you always come back to Klinka with the good spectrum. So Klinka, thank you for that, among so many other things. She has also produced a great number of books where she was the editor of those editions. I shall read the titles later on when we go through yet all the other aspects of her wonderful contribution to culture in general. She was also the invited lecturer at many foreign universities, obviously, the ones in the United States of America, University of Columbia, Berkeley, University of North Carolina, University of Oklahoma, Pittsburgh University, State University of Ohio, then in Great Britain, Oxford University, Israel, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv University, in Switzerland, University in Basel, in Poland, University of Copernicus in Toulon, also in Slovenia and Northern Macedonia. She has participated in a number of international scientific conferences in Serbia, Croatia, Northern Macedonia, the United States of America, Spain, Italy, Israel, Poland, Great Britain, Portugal, Turkey, Hungary, Argentina, and Austria. In yet another aspect of her activity, she has produced, together with Wilhelmina Šljić, 3 university textbooks dealing with Serbo-Croatian language, and that is also very important for her overall contribution to both science and higher education. And they were published by the State University of Ohio. As far as her activity as a translator goes, she has translated from English and Spanish and to English and Spanish, both ways, 13 books by such names as Borges, Marquez, Nadal, Petrova, Jim, Bernstein, Alvarez, Sigma, and others. She has also published in books and journals, scientific journals, translations of Ortega Gasset and many other authors who are very significant for the history of literature. Pinka Bigdakovic-Becker has also been awarded justly and deservedly. She is the recipient of the award that bears the name of Miloš Đurić, a famous professor from the University of Belgrade. She has been also the editor of the English section of the Amerikanski Srbogram, published by the Serbian Srpski Nacionalni Savez, Serbian National Federation in Pittsburgh. And she is the residing resident editor from 1997 to 2003. She was the resident editor of that journal. She has also been the president of the editorial council of Relations, Serbian Literary Quarterly. She has been a long-term member of the publishing the editorial council of the Israel Journal of Foreign Affairs, published by the Israel Council of Foreign Relations and World Jewish Congress in Jerusalem, also of the International Journal Colindancias and the Folkloristica Journal published by the Federation of Folklorists of Serbia. So also from this you can gather the extent of her contribution in so many fields. She is the member of the Federation of Literary Translators of Serbia, also of the Federation of Writers of Serbia, and also of Journalists of Serbia, also of Folklorists of Serbia. She's also the member of World Congress of Jewish Studies, European Association of Jewish Studies, North American Society of Serbian Studies, Association for Slavic, East European and Eurasian Studies, Kommission für Volksdichtung also one of the famous commissions that she is a member. And she was also a member of the Federation of Simultaneous Translators of Serbia and Asociación Internacional de Hispanistas. She has received Povelja Rastko Petrović for life achievement by the Matica Iseljenika of Serbs in the region, which means the Association of Serbs who, I don't know how Iseljenica would be translated actually, so immigrants or emigrants, better immigrants. She has received, also she was recognized for the development of Hispanic studies by the Philological Faculty of the University of Belgrade, by the Chair for Iberian Studies. She feels in her studies and her research and her writing are tied to the following fields, as you can gather from everything that we've heard so far. Hispanic studies, Sephardic studies, Jewish studies, Serbian studies, literature of the Holocaust, folklore studies, comparative studies, and all sorts of studies dealing with culture and literature of diaspora communities, both Serbian and others. She is a great scholar in both the theory and the history of translation. She is also a great scholar in the field of memory studies, also of feminine literature, and the field of international politics. I must first and foremost mention her book, Kultura španskih Jevreja na Jugoslovenskom tlu, 16. do 20. veku. So the culture of Spanish Jews on Yugoslav soil from the 16th to the 20th century. This is the seminal book that all of us depend upon, not only here in Serbia, but all over the world. And these are the very foundations of Sephardic studies, not only in Serbia, but internationally. This book has had several editions, several publications in 1986, and then in 1990, and recently in 2001. Another book that she has published is called Ogledi u usmenoj književnosti, dealing with the folklore literature, the oral literature, and published in Belgrade in 1990. Yet another, Serbia and Španija, on the literary ties between Serbia and Spain, published in Belgrade 2007. Srbi u Americi i njihova periodika, Serbs in America and their journals, periodical publications, published in Belgrade in 2007. Od Balkana do Tihog okeana, kultura i književnost srpskih iseljenika u SAD. From the Balkans to the Pacific, the culture and literature of Serbian immigrants to the United States of America, published in Belgrade in 2014. Aspects of culture, Serbian Americans, History, Culture, and Press, Los Angeles, 2015. Horizonti, Hispania, published in Belgrade in 2017. From 2021, Krinka Vidaković-Petrov is the acting director of the Memorial Center of Staro Sajmište in Belgrade. These are just a few words that I offer. This is why I have stage fright more than any other time in my life I've spoken to audiences, but this is really a very important moment when we call Dr. Krinka Vidaković-Petrov to receive the order of
como si respondiendo a la petición de los doctores de la historia estudio sobre la cultura judeo-española sobre el este yugoslavo fue un laboro pionero y aislado, un vero colero di bar a mano, una voz que alcanzó de inspirar, convidar y crear muchas más. Queriendo demostrar nuestro sincero reconocimiento de su obra de toda la vida y su contribución extraordinaria al estudio, preservación y promoción del patrimonio judío yugoslavo, vuestra profunda apreciación por el rol importante que jugó y juga en el desarrollamiento de las siempre pulsantes relaciones entre los pueblos y estados serbo y judío, encoronado por su mandato como ambasadora de Serbia en Montenegro e Israel, brindándome mucha lucidità en su presente esfuerzo del establecimiento y la dirección del Centro de Memoria Staro Sajmište, el Centro Navon de la Universidad de New York, le otorga a una gran calidad de respeto este orden de caballería del Ladino al nombre del don Yitzhak Navon Alao Shalom, el 5º presidente del Estado de Israel y el primer presidente honorario del centro. Dado aquí en la ciudad de Belgrado, el 30 del mes de Sivan, 5.782 de la creación del mundo.
So I did all my work, I did my PhD while he was president of Israel. And then, of course, at that time, I was just in love with what I was doing, and I'm still in love with it. And so many years passed, I did this, I did that. You heard my colleague and speak in too many details about my work. I never dreamed I would be ambassador in Israel. But then things just happened, and I found myself in this role. And I was happy about it, although it was a very great challenge. It was a challenging job. And when I was invited with my husband, Sasha, to go to the Cinematheque in Jerusalem, there was a movie an American director had made about Sephardim in Sarah. And so they were going to show this movie, a documentary in the Cinematheque, and of course we were invited, we went, and after the movie they asked me in advance to give a little speech about the Spanish Jews in Yugoslavia, Sarah, but some other places as well, because my fellow ambassador representing Bosnia and Herzegovina never came for this event. So I spoke about the Jews in Sarah. Okay. And after that, there was a little concert and finally a cocktail. And at the cocktail, my husband and I were having a sip of wine, and a nice gentleman comes up and he says, "Hello, my name is Yitzhak Navon." Really? And then before we could say anything, he begins to sing Navon in Serbia. And Sasha and I were amazed. We had no idea where did this come from. But we were, of course, very happy about it. And we met and we talked with Mr. Navon, and he explained how he learned the song. That was in the 50s when he was posted as a diplomat to Argentina. And those times, many people traveled by ship, by boat. And so this boat ride across the ocean took like a week or so to get from Europe to Argentina. And he said that every evening there was a group of passengers on this boat that they would get together and sing songs from their different countries. And there was a young lady from Belgrade who used to sing Down the Lake. And she sang it all the time, and he learned the song because he liked it, and he never forgot it. So that's how I remembered this song. And to finish my story about secret connections, when I was completing my term in Israel, all ambassadors that have completed their term go through the same thing. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs organizes official lunch, and there's people invited to this lunch, fellow ambassadors, and also invitees of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So one of the people that were there was Mr. Yitzhak. He came for the farewell lunch in my honor. And there were also other ambassadors from post-Yugoslav countries. Doesn't matter which. And anyway, when you get to the desserts, that's when the speeches are given. So there was one speech, another speech, and so on. And when we were getting to the end, Mr. Navon said, "I'd like to say something." And instead of saying something, he sang Namo Daleko for me as a farewell song. And my fellow ambassadors from post-Yugoslavia were so amazed and confused that they sang with him. After this was finished, my fellow ambassador from a neighboring country came up to me and said, "Rinka, how did you manage to teach the to sing Namo Daleko?"
we will make a small musical intermezzo that way. And I hope, I just saw Stefan, but I saw him without his instrument, which means he will be back. He will be back in 2 minutes. And no, in a minute, he's here. So first of all, we would all like to thank Stefan Sandwich for allowing us to have this conference today at this place. Stefan is the Chazan of the Jewish community of Belgrade, and he's also the director of the Jewish Cultural Center of Belgrade. He's a musician and the theater director and many other things. But now we will hear him with Sephardic music. For you.
che venga chi io le darei, quien quiere gozar mancebo, y no se case a la vejez. Digo yo, por mis pecados, ante casi de 36, pidieron una hija que no tenía 16. Ella era muy pomposa y yo un hombre gastador, castillo mío vivo suyo, y lo que su padre se me cedió. Ahora por este pecado yo me hice encargador. Ella abre la lana, yo encargo en algodón. Ma mi non me parió mi madre,
tonight, first of all, thank you, Stefan. You brought us to heaven. Today we have two laureates belonging to two different categories. The first laureate was Obra de toda la vida, in other words, for entire life effort. Our second laureate tonight, he has done tremendous contribution in the field of preservation of Sephardic and generally Jewish culture, not only in Serbia, but in all of Yugoslavia. The way that things are done today, in other words, digitalization of anything tangible, imaginable, and so on. So I would like to invite now Don Vuk Daltovic, who was laureate of the Cavaliero del Ladino Prize a few years ago, to present our second laureate, Donna Biljana Al-Bahari. Vuk, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Quite suitable. Dear ladies and gentlemen and royal damas present here tonight, I have great honor to announce and to speak a little bit about dear Biljana Al-Bahari. We have generally some old Serbian proverb which says if the time is money, and it's something that we know very well. A lot of very well people who don't have time, or that time which was given by Hashem to all of us, the number of summers and autumns and winters, and nobody knows how many of these are given to every person, to dedicate to some bigger goals. Biljana Al-Bahari is certainly one of these special persons who decide to spend her lifetime, her free time, in some really and indeed bigger goal than something temporarily and something which pass like our lives. There is also a psalm that we are like grass who is passing away very, very quickly. So, Biljana Al-Bahari is a person who is formerly a librarian, and I will read now because I think it's quite decent to have that proper way of giving the reason and personal biographies and the goals of somebody who make that she will present it by herself, of course, a little bit later. She's the founder and, shall we say, mother or creator of Jewish Digital Library. All of us, we are always in some sort of problem, rush, how to find a document, how to find a book. Most of them are in some libraries, private collections as well. And private charisma of Biljana and real devotion was in fact behind all of these things, because she collected, on the end, after so many years, the biggest number of all kinds of varied materials we are using, and we will use and would use. We still don't know what will be the final of all our needs, but digital archaeology and the far future will certainly be used when all these manuscripts and things we are still dealing with somehow disappearing in time. We will have that digitalized trace of our civilization, and there is probably, you have seen that Steven Spielberg film called Artificial Intelligence. It's very, very, very tangible film and interesting about civilization and love and many other things. So Biljana is one special person who creates special content. So she is nowadays a library consultant in the National Library of Serbia, and she of course graduated from comparative literature and librarianship in the Faculty of Philosophy in Sarajevo. Again, some important person from Sarajevo. And her topic, final thesis in the time, was Library of the Jewish Community in Sarajevo. So it was like an annunciation of future her job and the interest of Vienna. Then she got a job in the Clinic for Children's Disease in Sarajevo. It's again connected with a lot of mitzvahs. And she lived and worked there until the war, of course, in 1992. Then she came to Belgrade. And she worked as a librarian in two academic institutions in Belgrade. First is the Institute of Social Sciences, of Philosophy and Social Theory. Since 2016, Biljana worked as a library consultant at the Bibliographical Department of the National Library of Serbia. Her personal and professional interests refer to the research of cultural heritage of the Jewish national minority in Serbia, and after completing the training for archivists and librarians from Serbia, which was organized at the International School of Holocaust Studies in Yad Vashem in 2017, her current and future interests include introducing librarians from Serbia to the basics of Yad Vashem's educational philosophy and Jewish heritage, and recognizing the personal and institutional potential of creating and implementing various programs based on library materials and global history. But in fact, she created by herself the biggest database we have in ex-Yugoslavia. And now, I will proceed. She is also a member of Shoah Lab. It's some special way of Holocaust Studies Laboratory, which was founded as a hub for disciplinary and methodologically different approaches to Holocaust research. She is also a board member of Kaver Serbia and the Remember Hilda Dajča board, as well as the Serbian Library Association and Belgrade Jewish Community, of course. For several years now, Biljana Bahari has been a secretary at the editorial office of the academically peer-reviewed journals Philosophy and Society and Critique, Journal of Philosophy and Theory of Society. She won the second prize at the 59th prize competition for works with the Jewish themes awarded by the Federation of Jewish Communities of Serbia. And she has published until now 6 books. She is the author and co-author of many professional texts in the periodicals and collections of paper magazines. She gave numerous lectures at home and abroad, and she is a member of numerous international and local projects in the field of education, librarianship and science. I would like to emphasize some of her writings. In 2021, she published a book titled Bibliography of Books on Jews and Judaism printed in Serbia from 1837 to 2017. In 2020, she published a book called Review of Jewish Periodicals in Serbia from 1888 to 2019. In 2017, she published 2 books. The first is titled Writing, Suffering, a Book of Books, a Guide to Holocaust Publications, and the second one, Turning Over the Page of Time, Jewish Periodicals in Serbia, 1888-2016, also published in Belgrade. But her, in fact, life project is the founding of that Jewish digital library, a certain database, as the thematic digital repository of the Jewish Digital Library Association. This repository provides open access to publications and other materials related to Jewish heritage in Serbia, ex-Yugoslav countries, and all over the world. The Jewish Digital Library Association is a non-governmental, non-profit association founded to collect, present, promote, and preserve general Jewish religious and world heritage, culture, literature, history, language, and above all, to promote various library materials and literature about Holocaust. The software platform of the repository is adapted to the modern standards applied in the dissemination of scientific publications, and it's compatible with international infrastructure in this field. Finally, this monumental project is a fruit of the personal dedication and independent work of Biljana Bahari and only 2 other associates. So basically, she has done for maybe 20 years or more. She will give you a better statistic of her work, a job which one whole institute or even the library of National Library of University or something like that couldn't do in 100 years. I'm impressed with work of Biljana Bahari personally as a friend and her admirer, and now I'm inviting dear Professor Pavel
worden geafixeerd trouwens. So, queriendo demostrar nuestro sincero reconocimiento de su extraordinaria contribución a la preservación, diseminación y estudio del patrimonio judío yugoslavo por medio del lanzamiento y enriquecimiento continuo de la Biblioteca Judía Digital, una cuantosa y creciente base de datos, la cual abraza todo lo relacionado a los judíos y al judaísmo, escrito en serbesco en todas las tierras yugoslavas, empezando con documentos de archivas serbescas, vía publicaciones judías en estas partes, antes de la unificación, durante la primera y la segunda Yugoslavia, mismo como después de la disolución de la última, o literatura académica perteneciente al campo de estudios judíos y escapando con la literatura bella, composada por judíos lugareños, el Centro Museo de Cultura Judía Española de la Universidad Ben-Gurión de Belgrade le otorga a Dona Milena Al-Bahari este orden de caballería del Ladino al nombre del Don Yitzhak Navon, alaba Shalom, el 5º presidente del Estado de Israel y el primer presidente honorario del centro. Dado aquí en la ciudad de Belgrade el 30 del mes de Sivan, 5.782 de la creación del mundo.
It's hard to speak after such speakers as Mr. Yitzhak and Ms. I know that and I prepare my speech and I will leave. Dear organizers and participants, dear friends, okay? Dear friends, if I may have, it's my great honor and pleasure to receive this significant acknowledgement on behalf of those who have contributed to making and developing Jewish Digital Library and on my own behalf. I thank the Society for Sephardic Studies and the jury for the award, which quotation refers to loyal and mindful service to our common goal. Preservation of knowledge and contribution of the Jews to all world progress. I also feel this award as expression of gratitude and respect for Isaac Navon, inspired person who understood Sephardic tradition as inseparable part of the Jewish identity. The reason that motivated our 3-member team was feeling that small Jewish communities are slowly falling apart, assimilating and disappearing. That there are fewer Holocaust survivors and that all attainments created by previous generations are difficult to preserve, being lost and vanished again. And then that rich Jewish heritage and its presence in former Yugoslavia before Second World War will be forgotten again. That is why we assessed that the most effective way by which we can preserve and revive history of Balkan Jews is to collect, integrate and digitize written works on that rich heritage. We turned this idea into reality by establishing Jewish Digital Library Association. Our first project was supported by Federation of Jewish Communities of Serbia, providing us with technical preconditions for work. Personal and professional experiences and exceptional motivation of our team gave visible results that today we celebrate together. We found it
I think you can. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. We founded Jewish Digital Library in 2019 as a non-profit, non-governmental organization. Our work includes collecting, presenting, affirming, and preserving historical, religious, and cultural Jewish heritage and library materials, which we provide by connecting with Jewish organizations, scientific institutions, local and national libraries, archives, museums, researchers, and publishers. Collected material we present and make visible and accessible to a large number of users through thematic online repository database. We deposit various contents, from books, magazines, scientific and professional papers, to video and audio recordings. Preparation and processing of materials include selection, scanning, OCR process, image formatting, metadata entry, making abstracts and keywords in Serbian and English, and setting up digital objects. Our repository is based on principle of thematic branching. Materials grouped by topics related to recognizable content. For illustration, one such topic is dedicated to famous Jews and Jewish families and persons, especially those who survived the Holocaust and want to permanently preserve their testimonies, individual or family stories, by depositing them in our database. Our library is a useful source for finding thematic publications and depositing scientific and professional papers is often used by researchers from academic community who are interested in Jewish topics and cultural memory. It is important to point out that the results so far show that over 1,950 documents covering the period from 1867 to 2022 have been deposited. 97% of works are in completely open access. Jewish Digital Library has also become internationally recognizable and visible in databases such as Word Catalog, Global Open Repository Directory, Google Academic, and Core, one of the largest aggregators for open access papers. We have become part of the anti-Semitism network, and we are also proud that 70 new Jewish topics related to content and sources from our digital library are set on Wikipedia's review. The library was also promoted at several important scientific and international professional events, such as conference at the World Association of Jewish Libraries, workshop Jewish Art and Tradition, conference of the Library Association of Serbia, and webinar organized for teachers from Serbia. Jewish Digital Library is one of few European libraries that is also placed on the World Interactive Map of Judaica collections. Digital format and open access are signals that Jewish Digital Library follows modern technological and user trends and is aimed at the widest audience. Although this library is firstly intended for scholars and researchers of Judaism and Jewish history, it can also be helpful to state institutions and non-governmental organizations. In our future work, priorities will be continuation and increasing cooperation with libraries, museums, archives, and publishers. This will include engagement of certain ministries as well as cooperation between Jewish Historical Museum, National Library of Serbia, Historical Archives of Belgrade, Archives of Yugoslavia, Museum of Genocide Victims, and some NGOs dealing with the Holocaust and culture of remembrance. It would be useful to expand cooperation with relevant institutions from abroad. First of all, with the National Library of Israel, Yad Vashem, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, Electoral Archive, Europeana, and Centropa, but also with other libraries and archives in Europe and the world that have recognizable and distinctive Judaica collections. The fact that Jewish Digital Library doesn't deal only with bibliographic data and technical entry, but also achieves and expands cooperation with institutions and authors that recognize our mission, make this work even more valuable and significant. In the end, although this award is personal, it certainly belongs also to Aaron and Ivan, two faithful members of the Belgrade Jewish community who are dedicated to finding, preparing, and digitizing materials. I would say that each award expresses its donors and winners. I'm sure that those who awarded us recognized our trying to preserve small pieces of their Jewish heritage, especially of Jerusalem Jews and their unique history. I believe that this award certainly will be impulse and motivation for us to make further progress. Thank you for your attention.
Dear Dr. Popov, dear Eliezer, wait, we have something for you. You were and you still are the cornerstone of so many things. We heard that impressive biography of Eliezer just recently today, the head of so many official things, Separate Society, a member correspondiente of Royal Academy, so many things. He was the founder of Belgrade Workshop Jewish Art and Tradition, and it lasts for 15 years now. And we was thinking, what shall we give you for a small remembrance of all our gatherings, some future ones? So we got some small idea, and we have here something for you. I think all of us knows you as some peculiar collector of so many strange and different things. And I want to give you a small stone. It was a stone from the foundation of Calviejo. It's 100 meters from here. And during the archaeological excavations, I was present there, and I steal a small rock from the foundation of the Calviejo. It will disappear now. That's another sad part of this story. But the archaeological findings said that it dates from 17th century, and as a rabbi also, Eliezer know how many prayers to Baruch Hashem go from that Calviejo in Belgrade from that time, and because it's taken from the foundation by myself, I know from the exact place. We have here the small picture of late Calviejo, and down there is an archaeological site, now it's closed, and the rock from foundation is inside. So remember us, remember all these gatherings. Thank you for everything, Eliezer, and he with us on many years in the occasion, because he liked this also Slavic and church things, and mnogo ahead. Thank you.
Thanks to each and every, and we hope to see you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock promptly.